and the final problem has risen. The world doesn't reset itself like it's supposed to. This one really smacked me in the back of the head, I'm not gonna lie. What's going on, everyone? It's Izzo. Welcome to the lab and welcome to devlog 18. The higher these numbers get, the happier I get. 18 devlogs in, can you believe it, everyone? Today, we're still on break from Codename All Night, and it's time to jump behind the scenes of Galaxy Frontier's development. Lab, let the record show. I could not be happier. It's time to develop the second baby of SAVG together. Anyways, we're going back in time to the making of devlog 16, and to start, we're looking at some scrap footage from that devlog. The reason it was scrapped should be coming up any moment. Let's watch. Well, that's not good. Some of the enemies just stop being destroyed after getting hit with a bullet. This is not supposed to happen, and basically it's game breaking. Clearly this has to be fixed in order to record content peacefully. What a great start to this devlog. It's time to fix this and any other problems that popped up during the recording for devlog 16. To start off, let's talk about how this bug is really game breaking. Let's say I'm just playing story mode and enemies stop being destroyed. Well then, I stop being able to progress in any way. No leveling up my ship, no going to another world, no going to the next wave of enemies, I'm just stuck here. Hello everyone, it's fun fact time and I'm your host, Editor Izzo. So first on the list is the fact this bug with enemies has been in the game for a while now, and I've tried patching it a few times. Clearly that didn't work because, well, we're here. Now for fun fact number 2, Codename All Night, my first game, its logic for how enemies spawn in and destroy themselves is very similar to how Galaxy Frontier works with enemies. In addition, devlog 10 spawning enemies saw a similar problem with enemies, and we fixed that problem. Alright, that's it for the fun facts for now. I'm handing it back to Lab Izzo. Thank you for that, editing Izzo. The reason that last fun fact is important is because we could just apply the same fix from devlog 10 to the enemies in Galaxy Frontier. Hopefully fixing the problem without me getting angry and smashing the computer. I mean, without much investigation into the problem. My bad guys, I misspoke there. Anyways, we're in the testing phase now. This test is pretty simple. All we're gonna do is play the game for as long as possible, for as many tries as possible, and hope all the enemies are properly disposed of. Alright, after a lot of test games, it's looking like the game is holding up and all the enemies are being destroyed properly every time we play. Let's move on. Alright lab, it's time for another story time. After that surprise bug, I got paranoid, like what else might I find when I'm playing the game, like what else might break? And there's one set of features that really hasn't been tested at all, and that's 2-player mode, which is an extension of arcade mode. I wanted to avoid any surprises when recording, so I fired up 2-player mode for a test, and wow, about 30 seconds in and we already have our first problem. Look at the ship level for player 2's ships. It says 0, which should not be possible because all ships start at level 1. Clearly there's a problem loading ship profiles of the second player on the title screen. Look, I'm gonna be real with you guys. We haven't even made it to the actual gameplay frame yet, that you know the bulk of the logic and gameplay happens at. So here's the plan. We're gonna make a list of all the problems, then we'll tackle them all at once. Let's keep rolling, editing Izzo. Oh boy. Here's the second problem. This one is less obvious, even I didn't see it at first, but when looking at the ship files for both profiles, it becomes clear. Player 2 shouldn't have a shield equipped at all, yet here it is with the shield. Basically, ships aren't being switched out properly. Hey everyone, it's Editor Izzo again. I just wanted to talk about the next clip real quick. Basically, we've reached the end of the initial test play for 2-player mode, but there was an extra surprise that popped up while I was fixing 2-player mode. So this next clip is going to show you what I'm talking about. And the final problem has risen. The world doesn't reset itself like it's supposed to. This one really smacked me in the back of the head, I'm not gonna lie. This is a problem that can happen in 1 or 2 player mode, and legit, this bug just came out of nowhere. Here's some footage of the same bug hitting my single player game. Yeah, so I may have ignored it thinking it wasn't serious or real, but yeah, it's serious and it's real. Just crazy honestly, but now that we've gone over all of this, let's get cracking on these problems. Alright lab, let's get started on fixing these issues. Here's the plan. We're gonna go in reverse order of how we found the bugs to fix them. Mainly because we have to fix the bug with world restarting to have a more peaceful testing experience. So without further ado, it's time to whip out the custom debugger of Galaxy Frontier. Yep, if you've been here, you might remember a couple of devlogs where we put in a custom debugger to codename All Night. Well, on the side of that, I also added one to Galaxy Frontier. What we need to do is diagnose what might prevent the world from resetting itself. We'll use the debugger for that. There's 4 things that need to happen for the world to restart itself. First, all asteroids need to be destroyed. Then all coins and stationary power-ups need to be destroyed as well. Third, all the enemies that are in the game get cleared. And finally, we just wait and check for all the operations to be complete. Alright, with all the debugger messages in, let's fire this up for a test. We also have some good news. The clip from my single player game tells us where things might be messing up at. Look at this lab. You see that enemy on the screen? It shouldn't be there. It should have been destroyed. What we're gonna do is play the game and purposely get game over at intermission. Would you look at that? My suspicions were correct. Everything fires off except for our messages about enemies being destroyed. On to the fix. We need 2 things for this. First, we need a general, non-exclusive way to communicate to every system that a game is over. Yeah, I never put that in, so now we have one. 2, we need to check the communication for whether or not there's a game over in every event that spawns an enemy. And well, there's a lot. So I'll get this done and bring you guys back in for the test. Alright, here we are, and we're ready to test. First, we gotta test and make sure enemies still spawn in, and that part of things doesn't get stuck. Mainly because we just changed something in that logic, so yeah. Okay, so enemies still spawn in and we didn't break anything so far. That's great. Now what we have to do is we have to test to make sure no enemies spawn in once there's a game over. So we're just gonna trigger a game over. If we look at that object count, we can get an idea of what's going on. If it goes up, enemies are still spawning in. If it goes down or stays stable, that means that enemies aren't spawning in. We're looking good. It goes down and it kinda stays stable. Now just for the last test, we just need to start a new game and see if the world resets correctly. Alright, we're looking good. The world reset itself and we're playing another game. We did it, lab. Alright, lab. It's time to tackle the first official problem with 2-player mode, which is the ships not switching out correctly when it's the next player's turn. The problem lies somewhere in loading the player and the ship files into the game. Most likely, it never loads player 2's ship into the game. It's time to call in our debugger again and use it to step through the process of loading in player 2 and their ship. That way we can figure out where things are getting stuck at. With all the debugger messages in, it's time to test for the problem. For the test, we're following the same steps as our first test, using the same profiles and the same ships. Next, we're going to run through a couple of waves of enemies and then trigger our player 1 game over. Before we start player 2's turn, let's look at the debugger for what a successful load looks like. Okay, we should have about 8 messages when everything works correctly. Now it's time to load up for player 2 and see what happens. Now we just look at the debugger again and see what's going on. Yep, okay, so the ship general files and the equipment files aren't being loaded. Okay, after some investigation and pulling of my hair as to what's causing this issue, it's this flag here. It's called ship value set. It's never turned off, therefore it never loads in new ships. But it also tells the system that everything is good to go, meaning that no errors in the system arise. Alright, I moved some things around so that all flags that deal with the file system can be refreshed properly. Now we just have to test it. It's pretty much the same test, but hopefully we won't have to use the debugger this time to see if anything is wrong. Hopefully. Well, would you look at that, it actually loads in the correct ship for each player. We did it, this problem is officially fixed. Alright, it's time to tackle the menus, specifically the ones that deal with setting up a 2-player game. We gotta fix this problem where it's saying player 2 ships are all at level 0, which again, should not be possible. First up, we have to diagnose the problem. We'll use the built-in debugger for this, and we're tracking properties of an object called Player Info Collider. So far, everything looks good. All the properties behave like they should for setting up player 1. Let's see what goes on when setting up player 2. I think we found our problem. Ship file loaded should be off at this point. If it's not, well then the ship file is never loaded. The system thinks it's already reading and processing a file. All we have to do is add in an action to turning off the flag when the menu is being destroyed and switched out. That way, whether or not you go to the previous screen or to the next screen, the flag is refreshed and ready to grab and read a new ship file. In this case, our player 2 files will be grabbed and read. Hopefully. Now, we just have to test and make sure everything works. Okay, so it doesn't say level 0 anymore, which is a plus, but we still have a problem. Level 13 is not the correct level of this ship. I used the same profiles and the same ships for this test as the test with the gameplay, meaning that this ship that says level 8 is the real ship level for player 2's cruiser. It's not supposed to say level 13. So we're about halfway there, but we're still missing something. The level of the ship gives us a big hint. Yep, okay, so we found the problem. There's only one case for loading in ships, and it uses name, which is a global string that stores the name of the player, either newly created or loaded, for single player games. But for 2-player mode, the second player's name is stored in a different global string called pending name. All we have to do is add in 2 more events that handles loading ship files for 2-player mode. For our first case, the one that we're already working with, which is 1-player mode, we need to check to make sure we're actually in 1-player mode. We're going to do that by using a global value called player count and checking it to be 1. Then for 2-player file operations, we're going to change that check for player count to 2. We're going to bring in player turn and check that as well. Depending on its value, we're either reading name for player 1 or pending name for player 2. Okay, let's fire this up for a test. Here's to getting level 8 on player 2's ship, everyone. Alright, we got it. Both player 1 and 2 files are loaded in successfully. Alright Lab, that was definitely a crazy first devlog featuring Galaxy Frontier. A whole lot of game-breaking bugs that probably should have been found and fixed a lot earlier. But hey, here we are. I'm telling you, making devlog 16, the first official reveal for Galaxy Frontier, got a lot more complicated when things just started breaking. But hey, that's a part of the game, and I'm glad I got to bring everyone in for all of the fixes. And with this, we're one step closer to a stable Galaxy Frontier. Anyways, I have a big devlog plan for devlog 19. All I'll say is that there's one thing missing in Galaxy Frontier, and it's time to add it in. For now, thanks everyone for joining me in the lab today for the first behind the scenes look at development for Galaxy Frontier. I'm excited to finally be including everyone in this project. Alright everyone, leave a like if you enjoyed the time in the lab today, let me know what you think in the comments, and subscribe for future projects and experiments in the lab. Have a good one everyone.